welcome to the Run with Allie Live podcast. It is Tuesday, August 22nd, and I am so excited for today's podcast guest. It's the Hal Higdon. He is an 8-time Olympic trials competitor, a 4 times mastered record holder, and a writer. Hal, your book is the first book I ever picked up when I started running. I had to tell you. Yeah. And thank you so much for being here today. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure being on your show.
Yeah, thank you so much. And really quickly, before we introduce Hal more formally, for those of you who are returning to the show, if you have not subscribed to the show already, please do so after today's episode. And for those of you who are new on here, welcome. You came to a really good chat. So, Hal Higdon, welcome to the Run with Allie Live podcast.
Good to be here.
Yes, it's a pleasure having you here. I have to ask you, how are you doing?
Reasonably well. Yeah, I get busy, get out every morning to do a little bit of a workout, and fun. It's been a great summer, at least here in the Midwest, for people who are running. And of course, I sort of ride on a runner's route, and I have a water fountain out in front of my house, so I'm able to give back to runners who support me.
That's incredible. Wow, you've had so many accomplishments in your career, and I'm sure you're not done. And I have to start out by asking a question about the marathon distance because you told me to ask this question, and I love the marathon. And I know the listeners on here really could benefit from all of the advice you have to offer. So, in the marathon distance, what did you learn by failing to finish the marathon for the first time in Boston?
Actually, I failed to finish my first 3 marathons, Boston, Culver City, and then Boston the second time. And of course, what I was trying to do is I was trying to win the race, not merely finish the race. I had an overdose of hubris, and so I would go out fast with the leaders, which used to be my successful tactic as a track and field athlete. Well, at about the 22-mile mark, that tactic doesn't always be good. So basically, I had to, after several failures, I had to back up my tactics and let the fast runners go and hope that I could catch a few of them by the end of the race rather than merely staying with them at the beginning of the race. And I continue to use that advice for runners. Most of the people who follow my training programs online should not be standing in the front row. Leave that position for the Kenyans and the Ethiopians, and find a comfortable position in the middle of the starting line, or even in the back of it. And that's the way for success.
Yeah, so many, thank you for sharing that. I think that, yeah, my experience running marathons too, it's so hard to pull yourself back at the beginning, and it's so exciting. But to the listeners on here, Hal said it himself, save your energy for the last 10K of a marathon. Right, Hal?
Exactly, yeah. And hope that you did it right and you get into that 10K with a little gas left in the tank.
Yeah. So if I may ask, what happened your first attempt to finish? Like, where did you just feel like the wheels were falling off, I guess?
Well, I don't know if I can give you a precise answer, because I've tended to block out bad experiences in my running career. But I can tell you that usually it starts happening by, lo and behold, everybody ought to know the answer to that, the 20-mile mark. That's about the point where the scientists tell us that our body is beginning to run out of glycogen, the fuel by which we fuel our muscles. It's sort of like if you were in the Indianapolis 500 speed car race, and you had the gas was gone in the tank, and you're just not going to finish after maybe even leading the race. So it took me a while to really get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough, it's a tough mile, but that's, yeah. I mean, it's great to hear you speak about that. Did you ever think of walking?
Well, sometimes you're forced to walk. And I've had a couple of marathons where I got down to the last 4 or 5 miles, having tried to, again, bad strategy, win the race, and now I'm forced into walking. And what I usually would do is I would look up ahead and spot a tree or a lamppost, and I tell myself, well, I'm going to walk until that lamppost, and then I'm going to start running again. And sometimes you're at the collapse point, to the point where you get to the next lamppost and you stop walking, stop running before you wanted to. But that's all part of the experience. So the rules are a little bit different, I'm afraid, for those of us who are dumb enough to think that we can win the race. But I won a few races, unfortunately, never Boston. I thought I had one year, but at about 18 to 19 miles, reality clicked in as the fast Belgian runner went by me, but I still had a fast finish, and got to the finish line and actually cried because it was near the end of my running career, and I pretty much figured out all I had to do to really run fast, but I was running out of years on my legs. So we all do the best we can and take what the Lord gives us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if I may ask, what is your fastest marathon time?
2 hours, 21 minutes, and 55 seconds. So that gets you up pretty close to the top 10 in Boston, even in this fast era, because a lot of the people that have gone off real quick are coming back to you also very fast. So yeah, it was a career achievement for me, at least at the marathon distance. Of course, I was still running track races at that time and posting some relatively fast times in places. So I've had to enjoy a long running career, and also enjoy the fact that I've been able to tell the runners who are coming in after me not to make the dumb mistakes that I made, and hopefully that I can help them do the best they can.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an amazing marathon time, by the way. Wow. Wow. Um, you just mentioned that when you crossed that finish line, it occurred to you like what you needed to do to run fast, and you were upset because you were nearing the end of your career. What do you mean by that?
Well, I had worked really hard for about a year to point specifically to the Boston Marathon. In an Olympic year, when I suspected maybe some of my rivals would be off running in the Olympic trials, which was several months later. So I really had done my training right, and training twice a day, and pushing up near 100 miles a week. And I didn't believe I really, with a family, 3 kids, would be able to maintain that level of training for much longer. I was stealing time from them. So basically, this was my last real shot at winning the Boston Marathon, and I thought I had enough talent to do that. But there were also 3 or 4 guys that had as much talent who maybe did a little bit better job of their training. And by the time I got to the finish line, I was in 5th place, but it was still first Marathon, so it allowed me bragging rights all the way up to today. But I didn't have that real trophy. I think they gave a diamond medal at that time, but they also had trophies for the runners, not money as they now have. And I had a trophy that was about this high that was not going to fit into any suitcase. And so I went to the airport after the race later that afternoon, walked onto the plane with this big trophy, carrying this big trophy, and everybody in the plane started applauding. So I guess I didn't do too bad that day.
No, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. You must have felt incredible. Like a whole plane cheering for you. You deserve those cheers.
Yeah, I should have brought out my uh, bowl and collected cash from them, but oh well. No, kidding, kidding.
No, no, but it's so interesting to hear how things have changed. Like I kind of miss seeing those big trophies versus like I've never like won a marathon, but I miss seeing those big trophies. Like I know there's prize money now, and that's very, obviously
Right,
people make a living, right, running. But yeah, that's the stuff you could kind of show off and say, I got fifth in the marathon. And yes, the whole plane's gonna applaud for you because that's such a no one else on that plane's gonna do that. So that's
right, yeah.
amazing.
But you're right. The prize money did not really start coming in until the 70s and the 80s, and a little bit of prize money changed hands beneath the table, which was theoretically illegal. But I think I won $50 for placing second in the Round the Bay race up in Hamilton, Ontario. But I wasn't out there running for money. I was out there because I loved running and because I also come to the sport a little bit late. I didn't really take it too seriously until I got out of not only got out of high school, but got out of college. Uh, I arrived at Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, with a mile time best of 5 minutes and 4 seconds, and that didn't win you too many races at that level. Eventually, I would go on and notch my mile time down to a fast 4:13. Except that there were people in that event that were faster than I was, who had a little bit more in the way of fast twitch muscles. So I sort of worked my way up through the 2 miles, the 5,000 meters to 10,000 meters. And after having placed in a couple of national championships, top five, top six, I decided there must be a longer event that I could do even better. And so that really brought me to the start of the marathon. And of course, back at that time, I believe there were like 3 or 4 marathons in the whole of the United States and maybe 1 or 2 up in Canada. So there wasn't a lot of pickings. The first year I ran the Boston Marathon, I can't tell you how old I was at that time or the race because it would reveal my aging body. But there were only like 100 people lined up for the race, and all of them were very fast people. We hadn't reached the area and wouldn't for 10 or 20 years later, where the marathon became the domain of the, in quotes, this is not an insult, slower people who are there for enjoyment and are setting their personal records maybe an hour or 2 hours behind the Kenyans. But the sport had it changed itself during the time I was in it, starting with my feeble attempts to win Boston.
That's so incredible you say that. And I know what you mean by like that. There's no offense taken. I think that it's incredible how marathoning has evolved and people like you have inspired other people who may never run a marathon in their life to just try. And I know you know very well yourself. Once you get that bug, it's kind of hard to just say no to and ignore. Um, how do you feel about the sport of like marathoning right now? I don't even want to say running, like, how marathoning has evolved from literally like 100 people at the Boston starting line to close to 50,000, right?
The Chicago Marathon, uh, which I'm sort of associated with, they have 45,000, and then New York gets 55,000 competitors. And if I'm not mistaken, the Tokyo Marathon, the Japanese are wild over the marathon. They'll have like 80, 90,000 people apply
Hmm.
to get into the race,
Hmm.
So and both New York and Chicago, for instance, yet you have to go into a lottery to get your starting number, or run for a charity, which a lot of people also do.
Yeah, I'll be at Chicago this year running. So are you going to be there?
Yeah, actually, my one of my grandsons, Jake, is going to be running the race for his first time, and he was more involved in theater when he was in high school and college at the University of North Carolina. So he sort of came into running a long, long time after it. I knew he had talent, but he didn't. It had took him a while for him to figure it out, and he's already run I believe it was a 2 hour, no, hour and 30 minutes for the half mile, which sort of predicts that he should be able to get a qualifying time for Boston if and when he finally gets around to doing it. So, but I've got three children and 9 grandchildren. Two
Wow.
great grandchildren, and most of them, I would say, are runners or doing something interesting. So it's good to see there is a following behind me in my own family.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's wow, amazing. Lots of runners. Lots of runners. Yes. Um, I have to ask you, this is not in our questions beforehand, but how do you feel about the run walk method? How do you feel about people run walking a marathon?
Well, no problem. In fact, I even coach them to do just that. Um, I've got a good friend and coach, Jeff Galloway, who pretty much invented the run walk system of running in a race. And I coach my people a little bit differently. I suggest that they walk through the aid stations, and that way you can take more water if you're walking, and also you'll slow down. And I did some research on it, and I figured you lost about 7 seconds every time you walk through an aid station. But half mile down the road, you're going to catch and pass all the people ran through the station. So I've run a 2 hour and 29 minute marathon at the age of 49, walking through every aid station. And my son, Kevin, qualified for the Olympic trials with a 2 hours and 18 minutes, and he also walked through the aid station. So it works, and I think we find the way that works best for us, and do it, even if it means walking the whole distance of the marathon. And there's some pretty fast race walkers out there that can walk the marathon in 4 hours, 4:30, and times that fast.
Yeah, wow, that's a really interesting take. Yeah, maybe I should walk through those aid stations next time. Um, Thank you for that.
Taking a drink of
Uh,
water, excuse me.
yeah, no, we all need it. Um, so it seems like, and it's apparent you have a lot of experience marathoning. How do you know the best way to train yourself and I guess, you know, a beginner runner or a first time marathoner?
Well, it took me a long, long time, but I eventually developed a series of training programs. In fact, if you go to my website, www.halhigdon.com, excuse the plug, I've got about 50 programs up there on the website, and they're all free. So people can go in there and pick the level at which they're a runner. My Novice One program is probably the most popular. It's almost a guaranteed finish. I used to work with help coaching the runners at the Chicago Marathon, and we did some research, and the people that were involved in the training class for Chicago who used my program, the finishing rate was 99%, and I couldn't understand how that 1% got away from me. But with the proper training, with the going about it, not trying to win the race, but trying to finish the race, and maybe picking a program that's a little bit easier than what you could have done if you don't mind uh, getting a stress fracture in your third week to go. The runners can have success. So basically, it took me literally decades before, with the help of other good people, Ron Gunn, who was a track coach and athletic director at Southwestern Michigan College, Brian Pfeiffer, who worked with me in training the Chicago Marathon peoples, and Kerry Pinkowski, who quite honestly uh, helped finance the development of my training program. So they're now available in interactive programs. And there's an app that will whisk people into an assured good finish. I think, the intelligence, if runners can follow the program and not get overwrought about it, they can have tremendous success. And I define success by being able to finish the run comfortably.
I love that. Lots of great information there. And thank you for sharing that. This is more of a fun question for you. Well, it might be fun. Is there some mantra or something that you've told yourself at the start of a marathon before it starts, to just calm your nerves? Like what do you tell yourself when you've stood at the starting line of a race?
I'm not sure I told myself much, but I've had some points and starting lines where I was so nervous that I didn't even know if I'd even be able to start running when we hit the gun. When you're standing there at a national championship and you with people on the left of you and people on the right of you, all who are faster than you, may not beat you that day, but it takes nervous. I remember we won the World Masters Championships for runners over 40 were at Toronto, Canada. And I remember being at the starting line and literally thinking that if the gun goes off, will I be able to move foot number one? I was paralyzed with fear. The reason being was that I was in great shape. I just run a great 5,000 meter on the track a few weeks before, and I knew I was ready to nail it. But that's threatening. I remember seeing a Spanish runner who, at the Olympic Games, he stood at the starting line and he was the world record holder, and he didn't finish out of fear. He just ran off the track. And so we have these worries, and even as good as the Kenyans are, I know those same mental problems are going through them. But what happened is that the gun went off and bang, everything went into flow, and suddenly I had what eventually would be the best race in my life over the 3,000 meter steeplechase. So that's what we coach ourselves for, and that's what we learn to do, and that's why we at the top level are willing to go out and not run once a day, but run twice a day and hit the 15, 20, 25 miles. And it's a total commitment if you want to be at the top of the world, if you want to be the World Track and Field Championships are going on right now, and each of those runners is basically pointed for that day for literally the last several years. And if they've done it right, then they can have their own level of achievement, which might for them be winning the gold medal or bronze or silver medal at the Worlds, as we call it. But for others at different levels, somebody who is coming into their first marathon and doesn't even know what he or she is going to run, how fast, just getting to the finish line, that's probably as much of an achievement as the Kenyan, the Ethiopian who wins a gold, silver medal. So I think we all succeed at different levels. And I think one of the great things about runners, one of the things that part of the appeal, this was particularly true in the 60s, when I was just starting my marathon running career, is you could literally walk up to the starting line and be on the same line as Bikila, the Olympic champion. This was when there were only about 100 runners at Boston, and now you have 45,000 runners on the starting line. And maybe the Kenyans and the Ethiopians, they're a little bit further down the block than you are, but still, you're in the same event that they're in. How many sports can you think of where you can be in the actual activity that the best people in the world? It's our Wimbledon, it's our World Series, our Super Bowl. So I think that's one of the things that's been a great appeal to many of the 45,000 out there that will be running Chicago and running other big marathons this year.
I love that. Yes. You know, if when I'm standing at the beginning of the Chicago Marathon and I'm freaking out, right? Even though I won't be freaking out. Say you see me, what would you say?
Cool it, just start slow. Whenever people you would come up to my booth at the expo before the marathon, they would ask me for my word of advice. It would always be start slow, because that's where too many runners destroy their chances of having a good event. They will go out in the first mile or two and then suddenly realize that they're running an average pace of 30 or even 60 seconds faster than they had planned. Well, they've burned off a lot of glycogen, and it's going to uh, burn them by the time they get in those last few miles. So if you can start very slowly, you're more liable to achieve success. I would frequently, back in the past, uh, lead pacing teams at Chicago and other races, and I would always try and hold people back, and I would bring them through the 2 mile mark anywhere about an hour, not an hour, but a minute or two slower than they could have capably run it. So they've lost now a minute to their pace time, but gradually over the next 5, 10 miles, I will catch up with that pace time. And I'll get them to that finish line on time.
That's great advice. Noted. Noted. Yes, when I'm going for that sub 3 marathon again.
Go
Um,
for it.
definitely am. You posted something yesterday about keeping your easy effort runs easy or about 60 to 75% of your max heart rate. And I wanted you to talk about that for a second, how that could be beneficial to a marathoner.
Well, if you're following one of my training programs, you're going to find that there's a variety of paces. So you might be running a fast pace on one day and then a slow pace on the other. Typically, for my at least novice two or intermediate one and beyond, and the advanced runners, uh, they're doing a pace run on Saturday. In other words, they will run for 10 miles as their last fast run, last final run before tapering. They'll be running at the pace that they're going to run in the race itself and tiring themselves a little bit because maybe that is a little bit fast. So then Sunday they will get into the long run where they're going to be running, like, say, toward the end of their training, a 20 miler. But I really want them running 5 or 10 minutes per, slower than they will in the race itself. And actually, one of the runners that I coached and had much success for it was my son, Kevin Higdon. And when he got out of college at Indiana University, he went to work at Pete Marwick. And he actually had to work a job for 5 days out of the week, but he was free on Saturdays and Sundays. So we were able to double up on his training, morning and afternoon in the Saturday, morning and afternoon on the Sunday, but surrounded by a easy day or day off on Friday and an easy day or day off for recovery on Saturday. And even though I was working with a runner who was going to wind up running a 2 hour and 18-minute qualifying for the Olympic trials, he was going to be doing a variety of different paces. So the Monday and Friday runs allowed him to really jam in some hard training in the middle. And while I was training a 2:18 marathoner, I used the same approach to the 4 hour and 18 marathoner because the same spirit of coming to that mid-weekend grab of hard running helps you achieve a success. And so sort of a day off for the novice one runner, and then you have 3 days of easy training, and maybe Wednesday is a little bit harder than either Tuesday or Thursday. So it was over a period of time working with my own training and also working to assist the runners who in the Chicago Area Runners Association training classes who are training for the race, and we're finishing an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours behind what my son did on that one day. they can achieve the success by approaching the game, approaching the race intelligently and running with the mind as well as with the soul.
I love that. Yeah. And it sounds like there is a healthy balance of quality work in there mixed with easy effort running and enough recovery between the quality runs, correct?
Yeah, and exactly. And on certain days when they're running an easy run, I don't care how fast they run. So particularly on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday ones, don't ask me to give you a specific time. I know my app's going to tell you you should have run 3 hours today, but ignore it because, really you have to develop your own level. So if somebody were doing an easy day, say on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, they might be running slower than race pace, just really strolling along, maybe walking and hanging out at the water fountain for a little bit longer than you should. But then on the next day, on that Wednesday or maybe even Thursday, they might actually be running at a pace faster than their race pace simply because they're feeling great that day and they feel like having a good run. So we're all running different paces at different times, and sometimes we have a partner, running partner that we're running too hard for them, or they're running too hard for them. But it all works out to everybody's advantage.
Yeah, yeah, very true. Thank you. That's great. Great advice. Two more questions for you. Wow, we've got so much great information here. This is one of my favorite topics. So, how do you feel about someone who's, let's say, going for a sub 4 hour marathon versus someone who's going for like a sub 2:45 marathon?
Right.
Should both of those people, do you think, be running a 22-mile long run for their longest run, or is it more about the time spent on your feet?
Well, it really depends, but I would say, first of all, none of my marathon runners go as far as 22.
I
my
love that you said that. I just have to,
run
yes.
20 miles, so that you can tell whether they're following a Hal Higdon program or some disgraced other coach. But basically, you have to go with some. Maybe you get out there and it's like today. What is it? 85 degrees out right now. Maybe going up to 90, and so there's no way I want you running it or near your race pace or even near your slow pace on a day where with weather conditions like that. At the other end of the spectrum, maybe it's 5 degrees above zero, and you're going to be incapable of running race pace because you got 3 layers of clothing on. So we sometimes have to uh, pick and choose our poisons and not always worry about matching what some coach, me or the other coach I mentioned, whose name I've forgotten, have tell you to run on that specific day. So, and that's why it's probably not a real good idea to go for a personal record on the first day you're running the marathon, because you need to sort of coach yourself to do it right, and that takes a while. It took me 10 or 15 marathons before I got it pretty good and was able to run anywhere near the level of my ability. So everybody's different, but everybody's also the same, and you have to just sort of do the best you can.
I love great advice. Thank you for that advice. And yeah, yeah. Last question for you, Hal. Why did you say yes to being on the Run with Allie live podcast today?
I don't
Besides
know.
me asking you, of course.
Maybe it's because I'm a nice guy, and it sometimes helps me reinvent myself by talking to other runners. I'm online. I've got a fairly large visible self online, and people can find me. They can ask questions on their training. In fact, I'm looking at my computer screen, and there's 2 or 3 people right now waiting for an answer. So it's a lot of fun for me to be able to achieve the level that I had. I mentioned earlier that after I'd run my fastest Boston Marathon, finished first Chicago, and had my personal best, I cried at the finish line because I realized I would never be able to equal that again. well, I was really wrong because as I got another 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever number of years into my career, I have achieved as much success by helping others as I once was able to help myself. So here we are.
Here we are. And one final question, I promise this time.
Oh,
Uh,
no. Oh,
is
bad.
is there one piece of advice that you would like to leave the listeners here with today?
Well, it's a little bit self-serving, but I'd say get a good running program. You don't want to be out there inventing your own workouts, or maybe even one that you get out of page 47 of your favorite running publication. So, I'm selling training programs, but they're also free on my Hal Higdon website. So please get one of those programs, and you can pick up in a few minutes everything that took me 50, 60, 70 years to learn. So have a good race, everybody, and I'll see you out there on the road.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Hal. And I will definitely, for all the listeners on here, be sharing Hal's website and how you could access all of his training programs in the show notes, which will be available across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, you name it. So, yes, Hal, yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
And with you.
Thank you so much.